do you have any opening remarks that you would like to make?
I think we're ready to
You don't
go.
have to.
No,
Okay.
I think we're ready to go unless anybody has any questions about how Zoom works. Feel free to come off mute. We'll be in your bottom left-hand corner.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and we shall proceed. All right. So welcome everybody. Glad to have you here. Tonight we are going to talk about how you can landscape for a very precious resource, how you can be water conscious in the way you address your front yard, your backyard, your side yard, whatever yard you may have. That's what we're going to talk about today. Some of the information probably will be a review for some people. For other people, it just might be the first time they've heard about it. We will definitely take questions towards the end. You can put those in the chat so that we can have them, and hopefully you'll stick around for the entire thing, and we'll get your questions answered. Okay, so no doubt all of us have heard that we live on the water planet, and that's because the vast majority of the surface of the earth is covered with water. And so we often feel as if there's an infinite amount of water to use. But in point of fact, there's actually very little water that we have available to us. So 97% of the water on Earth is salt water. Then the remaining 3% is sweet water, or what we think as fresh water. Out of that 3%, actually, only 1% is available to us. The other 2% we can't get to for a number of different reasons. One, because it's frozen in many cases, and two, it's just not particularly easily accessible to us. And so 1% is all the water we have. One thing I want you to remember is that all the water we have is all the water we have. It doesn't magically appear to us from someplace out in the cosmos. It's what we have. And as a result, that 1% is used for everything that we do. Cooking, drinking, bathing, recreation, other modes of consumption. It's used in agriculture in many different ways. It's used in waste management. It's used for industrial uses. You know, and one of the most consumptive uses in terms of industrial uses is producing plastic, and certainly the plastic that houses bottled water and then is wrapped in plastic. So the less plastic we use, the less water we consume, at least on that front. And then, of course, there's power. But just remember, 1% is all we have available to us. Of that 1%, some of that is what we call stormwater runoff, and we tend to treat it like it's a waste product. In fact, it's not a waste product. It's our water. So a long time ago, for most of us, we learned about the water cycle. And I think most people have forgotten about the water cycle because it's really sort of deranged at this point. It's very interrupted. But when things are functioning the way they're supposed to function, we have precipitation, like earlier today, and still out here where I live, we're having a little snow sleet thing going on, and that falls to the ground. And eventually it will melt and it will go someplace. Now, prior to everything being covered with non-native and essentially non-functional vegetation, and then everything being paved over with impervious surfaces, the water cycle could do what it was supposed to do. So the vast majority of it actually goes back down underground in an uninterrupted cycle, and then eventually bubbles up into seeps and rivulets, and turns into creeks and streams and lakes and rivers and all those wonderful things. Obviously, plants take it up because they need water, and differing plants take up differing amounts of water. And they also release moisture through something called evapotranspiration So if you were to go outside on a, relatively warm day and you found a deciduous tree like an oak or a maple or something that has leaves that fall to the ground in the fall and put a plastic bag over it and secure it, eventually what would happen is that plastic bag would become very foggy and little drops of water would have pooled into it. And that's because the leaves are doing the evapotranspiration. That eventually becomes evaporation and then goes back up into the clouds. And then the sun does its thing and we start all over again. So in actuality, long before this water cycle was interrupted, the vast majority of water did not sheet flow off into the nearest body of water. In point of fact, it went down back underground where it was supposed to go. Unfortunately, of course, what has happened is that we have rearranged or we have terrifically interrupted the water cycle. So we have done in native plant communities. We've drained wetlands, which are kind of like the kidneys of the planet. We have flattened everything because God forbid we should have topography. And also, we've replaced everything with sort of non-functional, non-native vegetation. And then we have, millions of acres of pavement, asphalt and cement and roof lines and all of those kinds of things. Resultingly, of course, then the water has nowhere to go but directly into the nearest receiving body of water, whether that's the Root River, the Pike River, Pike Creek, any of the tributaries, and then, of course, directly into Lake Michigan. And because we have very little wetlands, and of the wetlands we have, they are so highly degraded that they have a terrible time doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that is, of course, holding and storing water and filtering it and eventually letting it seep in again. So we have created a problem for ourselves, and that is called stormwater runoff. And so now we have to do something about it. So we make sure we direct it away from our homes and businesses and garages and all that sort of thing. And our goal is to get it to go down into the storm drain and drain directly into the nearest receiving body of water. And of course, as it goes along, it picks up everything that it runs into. And so here's an example of, it's a typical neighborhood, right? I mean, we've got relatively large roof lines. We've got a lot of driveways and sidewalks and roads. We've got, oceans of closely clipped grass that's non-native, few little teensy-weensy trees. And so therefore, the stormwater runoff now is treated like kind of an invader and we have to get rid of it. And so these are the things that represent impervious surface. You can see that the storm drains in this neighborhood are directed mostly on to the driveways, and then the water sort of shushes down and goes directly into that storm drain. And unfortunately, what happens when we have that kind of a cycle, or when we have flooding, whatever it comes in contact with, it takes with it down the storm drain and into the nearest receiving body of water. I'm sure you've all seen this where a storm drain has been sort of surrounded by leaves and grass clippings and cigarette butts and all manner of other things. And then it goes down through this grate to the magic land of away, never to be heard of again, except there is no such thing as the magic land of away. And it has far-reaching repercussions. So when you think about what we do to our lawns every year, we water them a lot, which is an enormously expensive and resource consumptive thing to do. Pesticides, herbicides, all of the things that comes off of our cars, even though we don't necessarily see it all of the time, you don't necessarily have a puddle of, antifreeze or oil or whatever, they still sort of shed, if you will, a lot of things. And then, it goes back down into the nearest receiving body of water. And when you have a lot of plant matter, when you have fertilizers that end up in there, it causes an algae explosion. And of course, we all know that more algae than we need is a very, very bad thing, because then, of course, as it dies off and the bacteria are consuming it, they're biodegrading it, the bacteria take up a lot of oxygen, and then that means that there's oxygen that's no longer available to the other aquatic life in there. And then you have conditions that make it very hard for, microscopic and macroscopic aquatic life to survive. There was a time when we could go to any nearest body of water and take a drink and not have to worry about it. But those days, unfortunately, very sadly, are long gone. We can fix it, but we have to have the wherewithal and the knowledge to do that. I just want to stress that it's long past the time that we have to lose our lawn obsession. It's completely non-functional vegetation. There's a time and a place for it, but it has overstayed its welcome. We can't eat it, we can't wear it. It really doesn't represent any significant food for wildlife. It drastically reduces stormwater infiltration because of that short, dense root system. It's hugely resource consumptive when you think about mowing it and fertilizing it and aerating it and all of the things that people do to their lawns. We can't have leaves on it, so people get rid of their leaves. Well, decomposition of plant matter is where we eventually end up with that really good humusy layer on top of the soil in various and sundry settings when you have a healthy plant community. But we don't get that because we try so hard to get rid of it. We try so hard to manage for this rather sterile monoculture of non-native grass that we call lawns or turf grass. And again, it's really no habitat. And of course, we all know that underground, below the root system of this sad little plant, is supposed to be healthy soil. But now we've all been sold on the idea that we have to get rid of those things in the soil. We have to get rid of grubs that live in the soil, and we have to get rid of voles and moles and all of the things that live in that subterranean habitat that are supposed to be there. The soil sort of depends on them as well as them depending upon the soil. And so we've really disturbed the natural order of things. And as a result, it's causing us a lot of problems. And of course, we know that we have highly degraded waters within the Root-Pike watershed for all of these reasons. And let's not forget about chloride contamination. But we can begin rectifying that situation. We can begin healing the soil and restoring health to the soil. We can begin protecting our precious fresh water, of which we only have 1% for everything, by rethinking what we do and how we do it in terms of landscaping. And so what we want to do is restore the relationship between precipitation and runoff and the plant systems, the plant communities that work together with it, that work in relationship with it to keep that water cycle intact and also to prevent further contamination of our watershed. So replacing your turf is pretty easy, actually, because you can use native plant species. And what I would like you to remember or realize anew is that everything around us was at one point in time vegetated with native plants. Big ones, little ones, native grasses, native forbs or flowers, native trees and shrubs, native mosses, native sedges, vines, all of those things. But unfortunately, it has been very quickly replaced with non-native things that really don't function anywhere near to the degree that our native plant species do. You probably know already that at Root-Pike Watershed Initiative Network, we have a whole host of restoration, or what I like to call reintroduction projects that involve all native plants to help restore the water cycle, to help control flooding, to help control flashiness. We were talking earlier today about in the springtime, we get loads of rain, it's really heavy, we get flooding and flash floods, and then nothing for the rest of the year, essentially. I mean, we're certainly in a drought in this area of Wisconsin, but native plants can help mitigate the things that we're seeing. The reason that we love native plants is because of their root systems. So their root systems are robust and they are extensive. Even if you look towards like the middle of your screen, a little bit to the right, you'll see a little grass called June grass. It's rather a diminutive native grass, and it looks like its root systems are pretty short. But when you compare that with the average root system of turf grass, which is on your far left, even this diminutive native grass that we have has amazing root systems. And when you combine it with other things, what happens is that these root systems, they form highways or pathways underneath the ground level, and rainfall and snow melt and ice melt can then travel along these root systems back down underground into the underground aquifer where it's supposed to go. It's filtered, it's slowed down, the volume is dispersed, and then eventually it will bubble back up to the surface someplace, and on it goes, and the cycle continues. That's why we use native plants, to help restore the water cycle, to help filter, to help slow down velocity and volume of precipitation that is prevented from going back down underground where it's supposed to go. We also use native plants because above ground, there's a whole lot going on up there as well. And so you have wonderful forbs or flowering plants that our native birds and insects and mammals and everything, they're hardwired to recognize these plants. They evolved part and parcel alongside these plants. And when we replace those, we help to protect and sustain those species. And as you know, we have something going on called the Pollinator Patch Program to support all of our native pollinators, and especially the rusty-patched bumblebee, which is unfortunately on the federally endangered species list. There are a lot of our native pollinators and other native things that aren't far behind, but when we start reintroducing the native habitat that they require in order to survive, to thrive, to reproduce, we're doing restoration work full circle. We're protecting our watershed, and we're protecting the creatures that live within our watershed. This doesn't have to be done always on a large scale. It can be done in our own landscapes, essentially regardless of the size of landscape that you enjoy. So one of the ways that you can help control stormwater runoff is to use native plants in sort of a, shall we say, directed way. Now, anytime you put in a native plant garden, you're going to be helping stormwater runoff to infiltrate back down underground where it's supposed to go. You can sort of up your game a little bit if you have a swale garden. Now, some of us have depressions or low spots in our landscapes for whatever reason, and those are perfect places to put in a swale or a bioswale. And so what you do is introduce native plant species that like to have wet or moist feet, but can also survive in drier times, into the depressed spots. I hate to use the word depressed, but you know what I mean. Into the depressed part of that bioswale or swale garden. And then upland, where it's a little bit drier, you use other species. And so You're going to be helping water infiltrate back down underground instead of flow off into the street and then into the stormwater drain. And you're also going to be supporting other native species. If this is deep enough and it gets enough water, you're certainly going to enjoy seeing a lot more frogs than you usually do, and obviously birds and butterflies and dragonflies, and all of the miraculous things with which we share this planet. Sometimes for very large applications, these have a little bit more engineering to them. But for home applications, you don't necessarily need to do that. Perhaps you have a spot in your lawn that, it's always mushy. It just stays wet for some reason. And the grass won't grow and the lawnmower gets stuck and all that sort of thing. Well, let's use it to your advantage. Let's use it to the habitat advantage and put something functional in there as well as beautiful. So here's an actual example of a swale garden. And this one, I think these aluminum poles are meant to be sort of garden art. It's not my idea of garden art, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. Art is what, you want it to be, I guess. And so this is just planted in a very regular and controlled and organized fashion with native grasses. And of course, those grass roots will do great stuff in terms of stormwater infiltration. There's a lot of impervious surface here, and no doubt, they can't grow grass in this area, and no doubt this is helping tremendously with stormwater infiltration. And it looks cool too. I mean, it's pretty awesome. They've banked the sides with more brick. You wouldn't necessarily need to do that. You could put more natives up here in the upland area. But this is one way you can have a very controlled and organized looking native planting that's very functional. I just want to point out that they have a lot of English ivy growing along here. Please don't plant English ivy. If you have it, please get rid of it, and we can figure out a native plant that will look really beautiful and not be invasive. So the next step up, essentially from a swale garden, is a rain garden. And it does the same thing, only with a little bit more engineering, a little bit more purposefulness, if you will. So what happens is that you pick a place in your property and you run your downspout into the area of this rain garden. And so you can see that a swale garden is just a depression. There's nothing flat or level about it. But with a rain garden, you actually excavate a bed based on the amount of square footage of your house that you're trying to drain. And the flat and level bed allows the water from your storm drain to disperse more evenly throughout the garden bed, and it doesn't run out because you create a little berm on the outside area of it because you want that water to stay right there. Let it stay where it lays, and then it goes back down underground and eventually back into wherever you're closest to, Root River, Pike Creek, Lake Michigan, whatever it happens to be. So this does take a bit more effort on your part. And the great thing is that we can give you a very detailed roadmap on it. And we're going to share that with you towards the end of the presentation. And it's the Rain Garden Manual that the DNR put together many years ago that we gave to everybody who was part of our Rain Garden initiative. And so that's how people figured out how to put in rain gardens. And obviously, they are vegetated with native plants. And so grasses and forbs and sedges and rushes, and depending upon the size of your rain garden, you can, and the area that you have to work with, you can incorporate native shrubs. And they just become pretty spectacular, actually. You may start out with perhaps 25% of the footprint of your house and decide that you love it, and then you decide you're going to make more rain gardens. And then you're even going to be more of a watershed warrior than you started out. But as you can see, this involves getting rid of turf grass. We want people to reduce the amount of turf grass that they have on their landscapes. This is how the rain garden manual is set up. It's set up for different habitats: sunny, not so sunny, shady, different soils, different slopes. Um, it's very detailed, and you'll be able to do this without difficulties. If you're going to put one in and you're having difficulties, just call me, and I can walk you through it. But again, it's both flat and level. Those are two different things. And then you'll be good to go. And then all you have to do is get your plants, and we can help you with those plants as well. So, as with any native planting, the more species you have, the better off you are. When I showed you that root diagram, you can see how different species have roots that are differently configured, and they go to various and sundry depths. If you just have one species, they still go far deeper into the soil than turfgrass does, or any of our other non-native vegetation that we put into our landscapes. But it's nice to have a variety, because you're going to attract more things. You're going to attract more birds, more butterflies, more native pollinators, and that's always a good thing. And this is a picture of a rusty-patched bumblebee, and it looks like it might be on Monarda, and it has a little pollen on it. And that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to do restoration work here in big and small ways. Most rain gardens work better in sunny areas, but you can have a rain garden in shady areas. You just don't have quite as many species to work with necessarily, but there are shade tolerant plants that don't mind being periodically wet. And so you can see we have marsh fern here, and there's marsh violets, and there are quite a number of plants that are shade tolerant that are really gorgeous, and they look so lush in a rain garden. So if you only have a partly shady spot, you can do it. You just won't have necessarily as many flowering plants as a sunny rain garden, but that's okay, because there's non-flowering, well, quote unquote non-flowering plants are just as beautiful as anything else. So yeah, I can't talk enough about native plants. There truly is a native plant for just about every single situation out there. The one situation where they struggle is that dense shade that is created by buildings. We call it building shade because it's dense and unchanging. Shade in the natural world is always changing. It changes as the leaves on the trees unfurl. It changes as the trees and shrubs grow. It changes as the leaves fall. It changes as shrubs and trees die back. It's always changing, but building shade never changes. So that's a difficult place to find native plants that will survive well. Everything pretty much needs a little bit of sunlight. But outside of that, I would like to tell you that, well, I'll show you a picture. So here's a few native plant species that do well in sunlight, full to partial sun, mostly full. This is just a mere smattering of the plants that you can put in there. And this is, of course, marsh milkweed, such a beautiful species of milkweed, very attractive to monarchs. There are so many. I could just bore you to death going on and on and on with them. One thing people forget about, we always want flowering plants, but when you think about native plant communities, they actually exist in a very diverse community. So you're going to have flowering plants, but you're also going to have grasses. Grasses are essential, when you walk into a prairie or a savanna, whether it is a remnant prairie or a managed prairie or savanna, you're going to see a mixture of things, grasses and flowering plants. you may see some sedges. So in my opinion, sedges are the undersung heroes of native landscaping. So you saw that picture of the swale garden planted with just grasses. You can make an outstanding looking garden, whether it's a swale garden or a rain garden, just using sedges. Um, Sedges are the coolest plants, and their fruiting bodies are all different and all interesting looking, all fascinating looking. So this happens to be a burr sedge, and most sedges are pretty short, actually. So there's sedges for sunlight, there's sedges for shade, there's sedges for a little bit drier areas. I mean, yeah, you can't go wrong using sedges. There are a number of different grass species that are good in rain gardens, and also rushes. Rushes are extremely beautiful. They look very delicate, and they just look fantastic in a rain garden. And there's all different kinds, all different heights. So I just want to put in a plug for rushes and sedges and grasses because they add structure and they add form, and they add interest. And especially, prairie cordgrass is exceptionally beautiful in the winter just because of its leaf structure, and how it blows around in the breeze. It's just lovely. So a lot of people don't know where to buy native plants, and that's understandable, because we don't have really any local places that you can purchase them. But Wisconsin is very lucky because the native plant movement actually started here in Wisconsin in the 70s. And it started because of an amazing woman named Lori Otto, who realized that, why are we wiping out all of these plants that other native things depend upon? And the plants actually depend upon them in many aspects as well. And so because she was a go-getter, and she was down with the struggle before most people knew there was a struggle. She started the native plant movement, and she was one of the key architects of Wild Ones, which is a national organization for native landscaping and native plants. So Wild Ones chapters most often have native plant sales, and we're going to talk about the Root River area chapter and their plant sale, where you can order plants. Now remember, it's a fundraiser. They're doing it to support the organization and to support native plants, so they're going to be a little bit more expensive than, say, ordering a flat of 32 plants from a native plant propagating nursery, but it's for a good cause. And if you love native plants, you really should consider joining Wild Ones. It's an amazing education in native plants. People are always eager to show you their plants and teach you about them, and it's just great people. Native plant people are just great people. Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District has a plant sale every year for rain garden plants. These are plants that are going to go in your rain garden, and so that's a good one to purchase native plants. Nature centers like Hawthorne Hollow have plant sales. You just have to go to the Nature Center's website and click on their calendar and find out when the plant sales are and when you can order them, when you can pick them up. And then there are native plant propagating nurseries. I will tell you that outside of Wild Ones and other bona fide native plant sales like MMSD and nature centers, if you're not going to buy them there, then only buy them from native plant propagating nurseries. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. And my favorite, I'm not shy about saying this, my favorite is Possibility Place in Modine, Illinois. Their plant stock is utterly outstanding. They are botanists, and all they do is propagate native plants. And they have permission to collect in southeastern Wisconsin and northern Illinois and other parts. And so oftentimes you can get something called local genotype species, which is very important. Taylor Creek Restoration Nursery, again, they are excellent. You cannot go wrong with Taylor Creek. Prairie Future Seed Company was basically the first native plant propagating nursery in Wisconsin. And it started small and it has remained small. And he really knows what he's doing. They don't operate out of a big facility. He still operates it out of his home. But again, yeah, you're gonna get real, honest to goodness native plants. Agricol in Evansville, Wisconsin, again, top notch, absolutely top notch. And places like Taylor Creek and Agricol, they also do very large scale restorations. And many of these places will also do smaller scale designs and installations. There's a plant place in Germantown called W&E Radke. They do a lot of wholesale, but they also do retail. They don't propagate them themselves. They get them from someplace else. But for a long time, it was about the only place that you could get woodland plants, which are often really hard to find. Partly because it's a little trickier to propagate woodland plants in some instances, and it takes them a long time to germinate. But Possibility Place has a whole menu of woodland plants. So there's Johnson's Nursery in Menomonee Falls. For years and years, they've had a good selection of native plants. They always had a good selection of ferns and other things, but now they have more than they did. But you just have to be careful about what you're buying from them because they do like to manipulate native plants a little bit. So just make sure you understand what is a native plant and what isn't. They started selling things called nativars, which is kind of a cultivated native plant, if you will. But because they got so much backlash from the native plant community, they stopped calling them nativars and they have another trademark name for it. Then, of course, we do have milligers. Sometimes they'll have a few things, but not very often, and they often get it from W&E Radke. Big box stores, nope. If you go to a big box store and it says it's a native plant, it probably is not. And so I discourage you from going to big box stores. Sometimes Wild Ones members will allow you to come in and harvest seeds from their plants, or if they have too many and they've decided to, dig some up and share with the community. That's another perk of being a Wild Ones member. And there are times when a whole native plant community is going to be destroyed, and sometimes they will allow Wild Ones come in to do something called a plant rescue. And so we go in and we take as many of the plants as we possibly can, and we find appropriate places for them to plant. Yeah, so we do have options in terms of getting native plants. These are not the only nurseries, but they are more local or regional to us, and they are all very, 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 very committed to doing what they're doing. And so, yeah, if you go to Possibility Place website, you can download their amazing catalog for free. And that in and of itself is a native plant education. They are excellent writers. Yeah, you'll enjoy it tremendously. So Laura, do you want to talk about our rain barrel fundraising extravaganza?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Nan. And thanks everyone for coming, and we can do some questions and answers here shortly, but we have a really cool opportunity coming up that is right up this alley. So, and I know that we did a lot of links in the chat box. So I'm going to pop some more in there, but I'm going to do them all at once so you can easily copy and paste them or click on them to save them for later. And I will also send them in a follow-up email as best I can based on the names in the list that are joining with us today. So starting on World Water Day on March 22nd, Root-Pike is launching a rain barrel fundraiser, and we're raising money for local stormwater projects. And it's not only just raising money for projects, but as you see, it's also helping in stormwater quality on your own property. So it's a really cool opportunity. And the items are refurbished, which is really neat. They're actually food grade vegetable and fruit barrels from Canada. And so they're really environmentally friendly. They're being reused, and they're about half the cost of what they would traditionally be on the market for something similar. All the stuff to install them comes with it. It's delivered right to your door around May 4th. You are responsible for installation, and there's some really great videos and instructions that we can share with you to do that. It should be very simple to do. And there's also composters available. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's also available for you. They're going to retail around $75. And if you're a current Root-Pike Win member, you can receive a $5 discount, which is nice. So keep an eye out for that if you're a current member. And then all the proceeds again is going to fund local water quality projects. So if you are not a current member and you would like to support the work of things like the Pollinator Patch program and these types of events, you can register for that, and that link will be sent in just a moment. And then I will put in a link to purchase the items so that you don't have to remember when launch day happens on March 22nd. I will send the link right to you on launch day if you fill out that form. It's just asking for your email and that you're obviously interested in receiving that link. And then there is another link that if you want to window shop and kind of see what they're offering, so you can kind of make your decisions early. We're going to also be having a spring ephemerals class. So if you want to see some of these native plants up close and personal, and those plants that come out and feed our really early pollinators, you can see those and learn about those. And that's going to be on our calendar. So that will be linked out there. I'm going to share the native plant sales that are running through Wild Ones. That link will come to you. And then the promised rain garden manual from the Wisconsin DNR, that will be linked as well. So let me pop those in there for you.
While Laura's popping that in, if you decide you want to put in a rain garden and you decide you need help or you need, just want to talk it through, please do get hold of me. I was the field coordinator and educator for the Rain Garden Initiative way back when Root-Pike Win was offering grants to people to put in rain gardens. So if you need any help, I'd be happy to help you. Not dig it in, but to answer questions for you.
Well, should we open the floor for questions?
I think so. Let me just see what comes next. Oh, yes, there. Contact information. Yes, go ahead and open the floor for questions.
Anyone is welcome to come off mute. Or if you're wondering something about your personal property or did I send the links too early and everybody's looking at all the fun stuff?
Could be. Or maybe they already know this stuff.
True.
Well, hi, my name is Linda. I want to thank you for having this program. I have heard of the rain gardens before and I've thought about it, but I hadn't thought or heard of the bioswales, and that probably is more practical for a small city lot. Actually, I have a large city lot, but it's still a relatively small yard. So I was glad to know about that, and just thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Don't discount your property in terms of a rain garden because the size of the rain garden is simply based on the percentage of square feet, your footprint of your house. And so, as long as it's about 10 feet away from your foundation, you probably can squeeze in a rain garden. We've squeezed in significantly sized rain gardens in a lot of creative ways. So yeah, don't count it out yet. So Jean is asking, are there any regulations on placing a planting in the ditches in a country setting? Probably there are. It depends on the municipality where you live. So I live way out in the county as well. And there are a number of people near me who've done ditch plantings. And what they do is they just post a "Don't mow this" sign, and they don't come around and mow it. And so, um, so yeah, I mean, you just have to decide. You have to determine what your municipality will allow, and then kind of take it from there. One thing to remember is that numbers of municipalities have really archaic weed laws. And even in some municipalities, they still list common milkweed as a noxious weed or as a weed that they want to eradicate. And so, what we are trying to do is work with municipalities to to get them up to speed in terms of ordinances that don't penalize people who want to do native plantings. Um, so and a lot of municipalities have weed commissioners, and they unfortunately they don't know anything about native plants. Um, so yeah, anyway, but so that's the kind of sort of vague answer that I have for you. So check your municipal ordinances, um, and just kind of go from there. I wish everybody would plant up the boulevards and the ditches that align roads, because man, I'll tell you, I mean, if you drive out in the county, you can see ditches sometimes full of purple loosestrife, and nobody's doing anything about it because it's pretty. Um, and so if we could get those all planted in with natives, that would be amazing. Other questions?
We have Rick has a question. Do you want to come off mute, Rick?
Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So Nan, is there any opportunity, or has Root-Pike Wind thought about giving any tours, either in-person tours of rain gardens in certain communities and or virtual tours of rain gardens? I do a lot of the stormwater engineering for the city of Racine, for example, and I'd be happy to talk about some of the city of Racine's bioretention facilities, and if there is an interest in having a tour of homes in the Racine area, I'd be happy to highlight some of the work that the city has been doing.
That'd be great. And yes, in the past, when we had our rain garden initiative going, some of the private landowners decided that they wanted the public to have access to their rain gardens. And we did lots of touring of those rain gardens. So the answer to that is yes, but we haven't done them recently. What we do give is tours of our restoration projects like Pritchard Park, and other places, so people can see these kinds of things functioning on a larger scale and how it works. But I know one fellow who lives, right across the street from the lake, who put in an enormous rain garden, who loves to have the public come out and see it. And I would be happy to get in touch with him and see if we could organize a little, descend on his property and talk to him about his rain garden. That'd be great. A lot of it's unfortunate, but many of the public places that put in rain gardens, administrations changed. People who wanted to take care of the rain gardens left and got other jobs. So some of the rain gardens, unfortunately, have been abandoned. And that happens, but the vast majority of the private ones are still up and running, and they look great, and are going strong.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, just for at least with respect to Racine, that's been a little bit of the case, but they are interested in revisiting that and identifying what needs to be done at some of their public bioretention facilities, for example. So I'm hoping to go through both with some of the public health staff as well as the city engineering staff to go through and identify what the maintenance needs that are at each of the different bioretention facilities in the city.
We should talk about that at some point in time. Yeah, I think that would be a very cool thing to do.
I'll send you my contact information.
Cool.
Thanks, Nan.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? I love answering questions about native plants. So ask away.
I know we have some people here who are coming to spring ephemerals. I'm excited to see some
Good.
coming up pretty soon.
Excellent. So you can do this just by raising your hand. Besides Linda, and Jean, is anyone thinking about putting in a swale or a rain garden? Oh, good. Excellent. We hope we see more going in. Thanks, Sally. Excellent. That's so cool. Yeah, it's a really great thing. And once you see, all the life it attracts, you start to have this sort of deepening relationship with it. It's like, oh my gosh, I saw this species of butterfly that I've never seen before, or moth, or whatever it is. I mean, it's really, you begin to have a deep and abiding relationship with the plants and the soil and the water and all of the things that go with it. And you kind of feel like much more of a part of a big thing out there.
I don't know if Ashley is putting in a rain garden or if she has a question.
Maybe both.
Could be both.
Do you have a question? Yes, a rain garden is practical on a small slope. It just might take a little bit more engineering. Yep, we will. I think we posted the link already to the rain garden manual. All you have to do is download it.
I will post it again right now, and then I will also send an email out. I just don't have the name for, if you can message me privately your last name, Ashley, and maybe Jean and Linda and Phoenix, if you would like that link, but it has been sent, so you can save it that way as well.
So I hope you find this complimentary, but I have Angora goats, and my most charming, loveliest Angora goat, his name is Phoenix as well. All right, well, I have nothing more for you. If you want to get a hold of me once you go over the rain garden manual, we can talk, and I can give you some guidance and assistance. And hopefully Rick and I can work on getting a tour going, because I think that would be really beneficial. And I think too, we should go to Pritchard Park, because what you should know about Pritchard Park this year, we're going to do a burn in Pritchard Park, and that's going to be, I mean, you will not believe how bright green it's going to be just a few weeks after that burn. So it's going to be pretty amazing. We're not doing the burn. We hired somebody to do the burn. So let's just be clear about that.
Thank you all for
everybody.
coming.
Yes, go for